Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Seekers of the Supernatural. I'm your moderator, Tony Sparrow, with hosts Ed and Lorraine Warren, and also tonight we have a special guest, Mr. John Zaffis. He's also a psychic investigator who has worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren for over 20 years. And tonight's program will be about a haunted home, but unlike any home that you've ever been in, unlike any home that you've ever witnessed or read about, except in one of Ed's and Lorraine's books, for it is a haunted funeral home, one that happened right in our own backyard of Southington, Connecticut in 1988, the home of Carmen and Al Snedeker. Now, this home was haunted by different kinds of spirits that we'll get into. We'd like to start the program immediately off with Ed and Lorraine and also with John, because John spent, I believe he'll explain, about 9 weeks in that home, day and night. So I'd like to start it out with Ed, if I could. Ed, can you tell us about the case, how it started, how you got involved?
Well, of course, we got involved through Mrs. Snedeker, who called our home and told us that she was terribly frightened, that things were occurring to them, that they were seeing ghosts, they were being physically hurt, even attacked sexually. And when she told me that it was a funeral home, I suspected that what they call necrophilia, which would be an abuse of a dead body, occurred. Now, in this particular funeral home, we don't feel that it was the undertakers that did this. Mm-hmm. You have itinerant embalmers from time to time who will help out these people. We think it was one of them. But what happened was that a body was abused, or maybe more than one. And we know that this can bring about terrible phenomena and hauntings in such a house. Mm-hmm. It seems that this lady, Mrs. Snedeker, lived up north, northern New York. She had a young son. I think he was around 15 years old. He had cancer, and she wanted to get him closer to New Haven, Hartford area. So she brought the boy down here, and he went into the hospital. But it was very hard for them to drive over 100 miles every time they had to bring the boy back and forth. So she looked for a rent. Mm-hmm. And she came across this house one day. She could see builders in there. They were loading lumber, taking things out, fixing it all up. She had no idea that this was a funeral home at one time. And she walked in, and she asked the workers there if it was going to be a rent, and they said yes. She asked who owned it, and she called the owner, and she told him that she would like to rent it. Well, he never told her that it was a funeral home. And down in the basement, on the bottom floor, the instruments they use for embalming, the embalming table, the chain hoist, everything was still there. Mm-hmm. But there was lumber all over the stairs, so Mrs. Snedeker couldn't get down those stairs to see what was down there.
Okay.
They just told her that everything would be cleared up by the time she moved in, and they could live down there. There was also what they called the sales coffin room, where they put the caskets, and these would be
like a display room.
Wow. That's what they called it, a playroom. It was far. Oh, it's
no, display room, honey.
And it did wind up to be a playroom for the kids, though. The son actually slept down there, not knowing that this was a coffin display room. And he started complaining that he would see ghosts, mm-hmm. and the mother and father felt that he was either hallucinating, imagining, or something. But by this time, they had discovered the fact that it was a funeral home. The tables were still there, all the instruments were there, the chain hoist was there. And of course, when they confronted the landlord, he said, well, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, it's not a funeral home anymore. Mm-hmm. But what these people went through was horrendous. There would be physical attacks to the extent that I was sitting there one night, and I felt as though I was being jabbed by a long needle, almost like these wool needles, what do they call them?
A knitting needle?
Like a knitting needle.
And the pain was terrible. And actual rapes took place of both women that were there. One was a young niece.
A niece that Carmen had her niece, Tony, living with her. Now, when you say that there was more than one type of spirit in this house, you were right. It all started out looking like there could have been human spirits. They would see human spirits. Even our researchers witnessed human spirits. But there was something altogether different. Besides that human element, there was something inhuman or very, very negative.
Now, you guys said their women were attacked. You're saying physically raped? How did that happen? How did that work?
Well, actually, in this case, both the niece and Carmen and her husband, Al, all were raped in this house.
So
That was the most...
The niece was the first one to start complaining about feeling something sexual happening to her.
Well, the night that... Let me go back to that very first night that I took the phone call in the middle of the night, Tony. I took a phone call in the middle of the night from a very hysterical woman.